All right. Welcome everyone that's joining us. We're going to get started shortly here. We're just going to ask that everyone keep their mics muted during the presentation. That way we are only hearing from the speakers tonight until we get to the end for comments, questions. Then depending how many people we have here, we'll just open it up. We may have to go through the chat function if we get a lot of people joining us. So we'll see how that goes, but we'll get started here shortly.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending Sarasota Strong's presentation tonight called Peer Specialists, a Trauma-Informed Approach to Recovery. I'm Sarah Miller, a peer specialist for families and family navigator with NAMI Sarasota and Manatee Counties, joined this evening by fellow peer specialist Tim Bisson, who works with adults and is the director of peer services with mental health community centers, Matt Silverman, a youth peer specialist with Success for Kids and Families, and Vanessa Miller, a youth peer volunteer with NAMI Sarasota and Manatee Counties. They'll be sharing more about their stories and experiences as peer specialists later in the presentation. However, before we begin, I'd like to tell you a bit more about our host, Sarasota Strong. Sarasota Strong is a growing group of Sarasota County neighbors committed to learning about trauma and responding to its impact. Our mission is to promote community-wide trauma awareness through healing, education, action, and leadership. Our vision is to create a community that cares for itself. We'd love for you to join us and become a part of our community for a trauma-informed, resilient Sarasota. We have various ways to get involved, such as joining a work group or registering to attend future training and workshop opportunities, such as this tonight. And we can be found at www.srqstrong.org or email sarasotastrong@gmail.com. Creating and accessing trauma-informed communities is a highlight in tonight's presentation as it relates to peers and individuals with a mental health condition or substance use disorder and their friends and families. So that's all of us, right? Next slide. A trauma-informed approach is something our mental health system has been undergoing to offer a greater sensitivity to individuals seeking mental health care. At a minimum, mental illness alone is a traumatic event, which often greatly impacts many areas of an individual's life, and can affect a person's sense of safety, acceptance, belonging, and security in the world. For this reason, the system has begun to shift from questions previously centered on what is wrong with you to questions that seek to better understand the individuals and how it affects their life today, such as asking, what has happened to you? Peer support takes this a step further and says, I see your trauma because I share this trauma. You are not alone. Peer specialists are individuals in recovery from a mental health condition or substance use disorder, trained to offer support and hope to people currently seeking help. To clarify, recovery doesn't necessarily mean a full return to your previous state before the illness, but according to the definition offered by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, known as SAMHSA, recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. And there can be many pathways to recovery, including but not limited to medication management, therapy, faith-based approaches, peer support, and various others. SAMHSA has identified 4 major dimensions that support a life in recovery, which include health, home, purpose, and community. Peer specialists are uniquely able to help people in all of these domains, but it often does not precede the connection peers are able to offer. The next slide. Renee Brown is an American professor, lecturer, author, and podcast host who has spent the past 2 decades studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy, core factors to consider when being trauma responsive. The following is a quote she shared about connection. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Slide. The peer specialist's lived experience allows them to be authentic and empathetic, nurturing this connection. They are not in a position above the peer, but are at an equal footing and share a relationship of mutuality, which is further described in the peer specialist core competencies here. Recovery-oriented means that peer specialists partner with individuals seeking recovery to help them identify their own strengths, vision, and pathway. Peer support is person-centered because it means that the plan is unique to that individual and their needs. It's also voluntary, so it's the individual's choice as to what they wish to participate in and to what degree. The peer specialists support their choice and do not push any other agenda. It's relationship focused. The relationship is the foundation. And trauma-informed, peer recovery support utilizes a strengths-based framework that emphasizes physical, psychological, and emotional safety and creates opportunities for survivors to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment. I'd like to now introduce Tim Bisson, the Director of Peer Services at Mental Health Community Centers, to share more about his story of recovery and experiences with both giving and receiving peer support.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Like she said, I'm Tim Bisson, and here's my story. When I was born, I was 1 pound, 15 ounces, and I was premature 3 months, and a twin as well. I was a miracle baby, and I believe I'm still a miracle today. My childhood was normal. I played many sports with my brothers and grew up in a suburb in Connecticut. For some reason, my mom videotaped most of my childhood. Because of that, I can remember things that happened early on, and I can see how family-oriented my family was. There was some trauma in my childhood. My father always wanted me to be his version of perfect in sports and in life, and I felt like I could never live up to that. My parents' marriage eventually fell apart and they divorced when I was 13. It was then that I started going to therapy, and my parents saw that there was something a little off in me. Through high school, I would go back and forth from the suburb where my mom stayed to the city where my dad moved. I thrived in high school because I was an active guy. It was easy for me to socialize. At times I felt like I fit in with everybody, but at other times I felt like I didn't fit in with anybody. I did well in high school and got into my first choice of college. I got a girlfriend impulsively and met many friends in a short period of time. I started to smoke weed and drink alcohol to try to fit in with my new friends. This took me to a very negative place very quickly. I started to hear voices. They started out as simple commands like open the door or talk to this professor. Then there were more voices, and they became meaner and more negative. One day I was coming back from wrestling practice to take a shower and heard many voices. I writhed in agony as one of the voices became clear. It told me to kill myself and exactly how. I attempted to hang myself in an empty room. Luckily, there was an RA and a concerned roommate who found me and saved me from hanging. Through that and some other drunken mishaps, I was eventually asked to leave the college. I started hanging out in the city my dad lived in and hanging out with the wrong crowd. I continued drinking and drugging and started riding around with negative people. Whatever they did, I was along for the ride. I went through tough times and unspeakable acts and ended up having a psychotic episode. This was the first time that I was hospitalized. I was in an adult psych ward at the ripe age of 19 and I was scared. It was definitely an interesting experience and I stayed there for multiple weeks. Upon discharge, I went back to the suburb and continued my malicious ways. I was also told to go on an outpatient dual diagnosis group. This would be common practice for my life for the next 10 years. After therapy groups, I would go out and party against the wishes of my counselors. I tried going to community college, but my focus was not on school, just on escaping from my reality, which was filled of daily groups, doctor visits, and side effects from medication that made me gain a lot of weight in a short period of time. The next 10 years were filled with psychosis, going back to the hospital, many different outpatient groups, and plentiful amount of drugs and alcohol. Most nights I was too obliviated to remember. I wanted to hide what I was feeling, and it only made the voices and visions worse, but I didn't notice. Some period some There were some periods, for example, I stayed sober for some months and went back to massage therapy school. I had psychosis and went back to the hospital. Then I went back to the school and graduated. Now I had a way I could get fast cash and could pay for my bad habits. I went to two separate rehabs within 2 years and had not stayed clean for the first one, which led into heavier drugs. I overdosed on heroin with a few so-called friends, and they dropped me off at the hospital. There, they saved my life. Yet again, I was on the verge of death. I was sent to rehab after a 3-week stay at the hospital. I stayed sober for almost a year after that. I also learned a lot about psychology from attending groups and had my own peer specialist in my life who was very non-judgmental and had helped me to invest in myself. I decided I wanted to be a peer specialist. I went to training courses. I passed and became certified. I started a job in the mental health field as a warm line operator and got an apartment with some friends. I started to play semi-pro football. Everything was going great. And for me, when things are going great is when I am vulnerable. I didn't have the support I have today to fall back on, so I relapsed. I lost everything, my apartment, my job, and my sobriety. It only got worse and worse. The drug habit and alcohol reached unfathomable levels, and I was now homeless. I stayed in a station wagon in a Walmart parking lot in the winter of Connecticut. I lost an ex-girlfriend to an overdose and spun into a death wish mentality. This is when I asked for help from something I didn't believe in at the time, a higher power. I had a moment of clarity and didn't want to drink or use anymore. I went to my mom's apartment and told her that I needed help. I proceeded to call rehabs in Florida because she had bought a condo in Sarasota some years ago. I went to rehab in Naples and proceeded to go to 12-step meetings. These supports saved my life, but the alcohol and drug aspect of my life, I still suffered from symptoms of my mental illness. I found a psychiatrist and struggled with medication changes for over 6 months. Most importantly, I attended mental health community centers. I remember being scared for the first time because my mental health diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder and side effects of the medication made me feel that way. But I knew that this was a special place from the moment I walked in. I was introduced to some members and they were very welcoming. I felt more comfortable being around like-minded people and really enjoyed the peer-run groups that were held regularly. I struggled early on with some psychosis and delusional thinking, so to remain balanced, I took a slight break from MHCC to get on some medication that I felt comfortable with. When I came back, I had more sobriety under my belt, and I was as well as I was on a balanced regimen of medication. It was then I decided to volunteer at MHCC by leading groups. Due to my knowledge at the volunteer interview and my experiences in life and in many outpatient groups, the program director decided that I was the right man for the open peer assisted liaison position at mental health community centers. I applied the next day and got the job. In my history, I had been on disabilities since my first diagnosis in 2009. I was not able to keep a job due to my functioning level as well as my addiction issues. Now, because of my job, 12-step programs, my spirituality, my balance of medication, and my peers, I got my dream car, a Mazda 3 hatchback. I became certified as a recovery peer specialist here in Florida. I have a better relationship with my father, and I am able to be a good son, brother, and friend. I have a group of friends and good support. Now I'm the director of peer services at mental health community centers, and I'm making strides to make MHCC in Florida a better place. I treat people the way I would want to be treated when I was in a wellness center. I am also a board member of the Peer Support Coalition of Florida, where we advance peer support in the state of Florida. I have been clean and sober for about 4 years and have not heard voices or seen visions in nearly 3 years. I founded a grassroots organization called the Sunshine Peer Network, and we are a group of peer specialists who host speakers from all around the nation that share with us what is going on in their states relating to peer support. I am blessed to be able to share my experience on a daily basis and help people who might be going through something that I have gone through myself. I believe that it is my purpose here on earth to share my life with others to help their recovery. I shared this with you today because I have been through trauma myself, and because of that, I now have the ability to empathize with people who are going through traumatic things. Today, I use my ability to empathize and my personal experiences on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That's really an incredible story of recovery. And it's just astounding to see all that you've been able to do and how you are able to circle back and work with peers now and offer them that kind of support and empathy that you were able to receive at one point. So thank you. I'd like to show now our next video that it's a quick video about empathy, and I just think it's a really cute little depiction that, as I mentioned, Renee Brown earlier, is kind of an excerpt from a presentation that she gave, and this illustration I think just is a really neat way to capture it. So I hope you enjoy it.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I just love that video. What makes something better is connection. It's that's a good picture of what empathy looks like in peer support. There's no should, there's no at least, there's no agenda other than to sit in the darkness with them, and that alone can offer the light. You are not alone. So now I'd like to introduce Matt Silverman, a youth peer specialist with Success for Kids and Families, and whom I've had the pleasure of working with on a few different projects, most recently in helping him obtain his certification, so he's well on his way, and additionally in collaborating on youth peer support initiatives to create more opportunities for youth to engage in safe and positive environments among fellow peers. So I'll let Matt share a little bit more about his story of recovery now and how he uses his experiences to help others.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'd like to take some time to discuss my life, my personal mental health journey, and just how I came to choose a career path in social work and peer work in general. I'm a Sarasota native. I grew up in a household that consisted of my parents and my sister. I was the youngest of the family. I found that my parents would often act as helicopter parents. They would kind of restrict me from hanging out with certain kids in the neighborhood or doing other stuff they deemed as potentially dangerous. I believe that that kind of helicopter parenting is the root of a lot of my anxiety disorders I have. The parenting denied me the ability to make mistakes and learn from them and trust in my own capabilities. In elementary school, I began to exhibit nervous tics, such as making weird noises with my mouth or having the compulsion to spin in a circle after I entered a room. Sometimes teachers would ask me why I was exhibiting these behaviors, and I never had a good answer to them. I didn't know what anxiety or mental health was at that point in my life. Throughout middle and high school, I experienced heightened anxiety, and around freshman year, I began to feel depressed. It did not affect my academic performance, and I was then accepted into the University of Tampa. Now, college was a very interesting time in my life. It was during college that my most serious mental health disorders arose, but it was also where I started analysis, psychoanalysis, and pharmacological treatment for my mental health disorders. While I was busy meeting people and embracing the college lifestyle, I noticed that my emotions were doing some interesting things. I began to feel very numb emotionally, like there was a wall between my anxiety and the rest of the outside world. I just didn't feel like myself. My father had been in analysis for years at that point, so I didn't feel too awkward in asking him about whether I could try it out. We were able to find a therapist pretty close to my school. I began analysis in the year 2013 and I'm still in it to this day. I can't describe how beneficial it has been for me. Just the knowledge that someone is there for you in a non-judgmental, emotionally open setting is comforting to me. We did a lot of important work in the early years of my analysis, and that wall I began to feel kind of dissolved a bit. I was also diagnosed with social and generalized anxiety, so yeah. It was around 2014 that I began to experience intense paranoid thoughts. It all started with me getting surgery for my wisdom teeth, getting them removed. The surgery itself went fine, but the aftermath was what really hit me. I was in a lot of pain and was taking painkillers while being stuck in my parents' house for winter break. To this day, I'm not sure if it was the painkillers I was taking, feeling stuck in bed, or a combination of both, but my mental health started declining rapidly. My anxiety was through the roof, and I began to think the police were after me. Every time I would try to sleep, I would be jolted awake by my anxious and paranoid thoughts. Lack of sleep didn't help my mental state, and I began to think the only way to escape my pain, and in my mind, the police, would be to commit suicide. My parents did not understand these thoughts and became angry at me and told me to stop thinking in those ways. It got to the point where I became hysterical, and eventually they called my therapist asking her what to do about me. And so she recommended that I get checked into a mental hospital. I remember my first visit to a mental hospital as something like being a part of a herd of cattle. The intensity of the meds I was taking caused me gaps in my memory. And I recall being kind of ordered around for a couple of days in a ward where there were no windows, no sunshine, and overall a feeling of imprisonment. I was very docile and was able to get out within a few days. I was prescribed anti-anxiety meds and remember leaving feeling much better. I was able to bounce back from these setbacks, and I was able to focus on my schoolwork for the next few years and graduated in 2016. Unfortunately, the years after college would be some of the toughest yet. After I graduated school, I really had no career plans to follow. I remember feeling very hopeless and overwhelmed by my own lofty expectations of who I was supposed to be. I was unemployed for a year and tried to get myself off of a medication. I threw my meds away and experienced intense withdrawal for a while until I saw my doctor and got back on that regimen. I spent a little time attempting to start a career in journalism. That didn't last long, but eventually I ended up becoming employed by Whole Foods. I worked at the dairy cooler for about a year and a half. During this time, I still felt overwhelmed by the feeling I was wasting my life away in a dead-end job. The paranoia also returned, unfortunately. I was utterly convinced the police were pursuing me, and I stopped eating regularly. Eventually, through my therapy and visits to my psychiatrist, I was able to get a grip on this paranoia. I started a new medication and began to feel more stable. During this time, I began attending Youth Move weekly support groups run by Success for Kids and Families, Healthy Transitions program. It took me about 3 trips to the meeting site to actually walk through the door and attend a meeting, as I was very nervous. However, when I did start to attend meetings, I noticed that even if I was quiet and afraid to talk, I felt something, and that something was the feeling of peer support. Hearing the various life experiences of the participants of that group helped me feel that I was not alone in my struggles. Their honesty emboldened me to share more about myself. Eventually, I became a regular at meetings and can say I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of quality peer support. I eventually transferred over to the vitamins and supplements section at Whole Foods without any knowledge of vitamins or supplements, which in hindsight was a bad decision that really stressed me out. I felt really out of my element and completely trapped, as I was convinced that if I was unemployed again, it would not be an option I would accept for myself. The job stress was eating away at me quickly, and I began to sink into depression again as well. I was feeling desperate. One night, I ended up taking an entire bottle of one of my meds. I feel like I was just trying to end the turmoil within me. I don't think I was trying to kill myself per se, but luckily I woke up the next morning and again, my therapist saw the state I was in and I was brought into a mental hospital for the second time in my life. I remember very little of that hospital stay, but I can say I left with a serious appreciation for life, as I do remember one of the doctors in the hospital saying that I was very lucky to be alive. I ended up quitting Whole Foods and preoccupied myself with contributing to my family's business for about a year. It was during this year that I began to seriously consider working in mental health. I figured I had significant lived experience dealing with my own mental health and thought it could be a rewarding career path, as I believe no one should feel alone when facing difficulties related to their mental health. I began NAMI's Peers in Recovery Mentorship Program and began taking various trainings required to become a state certified peer. I also began to research Masters of Social Work programs in the state and began an application for USF's program. I decided that I wanted to become a licensed therapist in the future. I was then told of an opening for a peer support specialist position that opened up in Success for Kids and Families, the same organization that ran the Youth Move support groups I had been attending. I applied for the job and got it. I find it to be a very rewarding position, as I can really tap into my lived experience and relate to our participants and be the additional support they need in their lives. I began co-facilitating the Youth Move support groups I had once benefited so much from attending. Having the knowledge of what it's like on the receiving end of services has really aided me as a facilitator in giving me an increased perspective, as I can personally vouch for the effectiveness of the services offered. While I currently can't diagnose or treat mental illness, what I can do is be there for my participants and listen to their stories, allow them to vent, and even discuss goals and aspirations they may have. I find that through my job and my own observations being a therapy patient, that sometimes people just need to feel like they are being heard. And if they don't talk much or share anything, sometimes people just need a safe place to be. I have full faith in the peer process and hope to continue helping people for a living. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That was incredible as well. It's so great to know that you're on this side and that you've made such great strides in your recovery and are able to work with others who can benefit from your story and finding hope in that as well. So thank you. Finding what works can often take time, and stories like Matt and Tim's can offer hope because it demonstrates that setbacks can happen, but progress comes from lessons learned, and unfortunately, often a lot of trial and error, but there is still hope for a better outcome even in those moments. Things that can help during those times are peer support. The next slide. The fundamental principles are trauma-informed and do not attempt to apply pressure or blame. Peer support includes voluntary engagement. It's a non-judgmental space. It's a space where people can find empathy instead of sympathy. It's where people can relate and sit with them in those hard times, where respect is offered in their relationship, and it requires honest and direct communication. It involves mutual responsibility, giving and taking on both ends. It's about sharing power and reciprocal. And the next slide. So now I'd like to introduce a new member to NAMI Sarasota and Manatee Counties, Vanessa Miller, who is currently volunteering part-time with a few youth in Sarasota struggling to engage in the typical mental health treatment. She is able to do this by sharing her story and offering a non-judgmental space with no agenda other than to allow these youth an opportunity to connect with someone who understands. Now I'll invite Vanessa to share a little bit more about her story.
Hello, thank you all for having me. My name is Vanessa. Since I have you guys here for the next 10 minutes or so, I thought I'd let you know the lively details of my existence. I'm 18, I'm a student at USF, and in elementary school, my parents got divorced. This was my first experience with trauma. I was soon introduced to a kid who I've forever called my brother after that, and my life changed. At the time, I saw everything that my family was going through as a struggle, but in the end, I gained more than I ever realized. Years later, I would gain a sister, and a few years after that, I gained another one. My family has changed, and now I'm estranged from my father, but I maintain fuller and healthier relationships. I'm so it helps someone else to know that there are other people who have gone. I was probably 12 years old when I realized that the moods that I was experiencing were not normal. I had dismissed these intense periods of pain as normal for a long time, especially because those immediately surrounding me didn't seem to understand what I was going through at all. I thought I had taken a completely normal experience and I had made it into something unbearable in itself. But it wasn't until I heard my own mother tell me to my face that a healthy brain doesn't want to die by suicide that I realized I wasn't that. I wasn't healthy. I had spent my entire teenage life wanting to die, making plans not around my future, but around my death. Around the age of 14, I decided to tell my mother that I needed help. Even then, I hadn't told her the full extent to what I was going through. It wasn't until I was being driven to the hospital by my older brother that I had fully extended that hand out, ready for someone to help me. When I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, I felt relief. I didn't care about what people would think. I was just excited to finally be seen. It empowered me knowing that others had similar struggles to mine. They had a diagnosis the same as mine, and they had survived. This was no longer just me being sick. This was me being treated. This was my gateway to recovery. It took some mighty traumatic experiences in my life to finally push me to that point of begging for help, but I stand here before you guys today, years older than I thought I would ever get, telling you my story. I wouldn't be here, though, if I had gone it alone. What really helped me was my support system, made up disproportionately of people I would call mom. My mother supported me and accepted me the entire way through, and I lost some people along the way who I had hoped would accept me and help me, like my father, for instance, but that's okay. I now know who I have on my side and the resources that I have here to help me. When I was hospitalized, I realized that my few cookie cutter were just so bad. And I would go and I would write what I thought would help me get through it. This seemed to help. I had also a lot of anger coming out of the hospital. I felt off balance with my new medication for weeks. I started working out, I started running, dancing, doing whatever I needed to expel this anger from my body. This helped too. Something that really helped, though, was my medication. Because for me, it helped to stabilize my moods so that I didn't have these suicidal tendencies anymore. That alone wouldn't have worked, though. I needed to see my therapist and my psychiatrist and take my medication. I needed to talk to people and create a network of supporters that worked for me. I finally felt equipped to go on with my life once I had all of these things that supported me. It took a while to get it right. I've definitely been on medications that were not right for me before. I've been to a therapist that wasn't right for me before, but here I stand today, alive and still in recovery because I keep going and persisting and using all of these resources that I have around me. I know that I couldn't have done it without help. I want my recovery story to be a successful one, and I'm working hard to ensure that that happens. For me, success is making it to another day. Success is doing my homework, and sometimes that's 50% off and a day late. Success is not making $1 million. In my opinion, it's not climbing a mountain. It's taking the steps towards doing so. Wherever I go in life, I want to acknowledge how far I've made it. Every day is a gift. And that in itself is a success to me, for I once saw every day as a curse, as a burden. I get to see my family every day. I get to go to school. I get to drive. I get to be here and share my story with you all. Those are all my little successes. And to me, that's all that matters. You get to define your success. Nobody else can do that for you. I did not lower my standards. I now accept myself at every stage. I'm now able to acknowledge the little things as successes too. Being here and presenting to you all was a major success for me today. So I thank you. An important part of my recovery is being able to share my story with others. This empowers me to be authentic and honest about what I am going through. And it also allows me to extend my own hand to peers who may have their own arms outreached too. Because hand in hand, we can support each other through all things. That is why peer work is so important. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you all for coming in with open minds and respect.
Thank you, Vanessa. And so now I am going to share my piece. As Vanessa's mother, I am thankful to say that this was our outcome. I remember when there was a time I wasn't sure we would be here today. I had begun to watch my daughter decompensate, and I felt helpless to change it, even though I was trying all that I could. Revealed to be deep depression with suicidal ideations. And before I had really processed the severity of it, my daughter attempted to take her life while I was away at a mental health convention. The irony was not lost on me. At that moment, the world stopped, and I quickly realized I was not equipped, even though I had dealt with my own mental health challenges and had been working in the field of mental health for several years at that time. Though I aggressively pushed the process of recovery for my daughter, and she had regular medication management appointments and therapy, nothing was working fast enough for me, and our relationship was becoming more strained. I was grieving the loss of a relationship I thought we once had. I began to feel so angry with her that she would take our relationship away from me. I felt so angry with her, as if she was choosing to feel this way and not doing enough about it. But really, I felt so angry with her because I could not change it, and I was scared. It was hard to watch someone once so full of life, humor, and love slip into a darkness so overwhelming it overtook me too. Mental illness is rarely an isolated event and often affects the whole family. I started reaching out to programs like NAMI, which offer peer support through education, like NAMI Basics, and family support groups, to be able to talk through a lot of the feelings I was having with people who understood because they had experienced similar challenges. Sharing within this safe and supportive environment helped to normalize many of the feelings I was having, which took the shame away and helped me to be able to move forward. By learning to identify my feelings as normal processes, I could release them instead of misdirecting them at my daughter in fear. Eventually, with us both working on the things we could control and releasing my need for her to heal, she could pursue her own path of recovery and try what worked for her, while I attempted to remain a supportive role for her when she was ready for me in her own time. That's when our relationship began to improve. At that time, I began to open up with her about my own history of depression and something I attempted to shield from my children in the past. However, the more I opened up to share about my challenges, the more we were able to support each other. Peer support was happening in my own home. To this day, we regularly discuss warning signs and encourage each other to pursue positive coping strategies when we're having a tough time. My transparency and vulnerability to be human indirectly gave permission for her to be vulnerable and human as well. Accepting ourselves and supporting each other has offered us a tremendous opportunity to heal without trying to meet societal expectations or even our own self-perpetuated high standards. Mental health is a family event, and I work to share this with other families today in my role as a family navigator. Before having met other families who had experienced similar challenges, I remember feeling shame and blame myself for much of what I share this with without exposing myself to further harm through their judgment or even their well-intentioned advice. In my own family, mental illness was rarely if ever discussed. I just had a grandmother who died by suicide, but was never spoken of. Aunts and uncles only miles away whom we never saw because there were some hushed concerns, or my sister with her label of having issues, or mom I am able to take is the greatest skill I can offer many of these families who simply feel overwhelmed, overlooked, and helpless to change the situation. While I don't pretend everyone's story will share a similar outcome, knowing there is hope and that you are not alone in the effort can make a significant impact on someone else's life and lessen the blow of trauma. Next slide. As the stories shared tonight demonstrate, recovery looks different for everyone. It is a series of learning experiences woven together through a system of connection, empathy, support, and sharing that keeps us moving forward, hoping, and trying. Our lives are witnesses to the value of peer support daily, and although this work is ancient, the last 30 years of studies has begun to bring it more notoriety. Peer support is now recognized as an evidence-based practice, and several reports acknowledge the benefit this trauma-informed approach brings to individuals seeking recovery. New Freedom Commission on Mental Health's final report, Achieving the Promise, Transforming Mental Health Care in America, stated that recovery-oriented services and supports are often successfully provided by consumers through consumer-run organizations. Studies show that engage more individuals in traditional mental health services source in the recovery of people with psychiatric. Furthermore, according to a report titled The Evidence Consumer Operated Services published by SAMHSA, a validating community that builds interdependence and mutual responsibility is a unique aspect of a consumer-oriented organization. This allows an opportunity to create accepting experiences and validating within that community. Being a part of a network of caring individuals translates into feeling part of a greater whole and a sense of acceptance based on one's inherent value. The next slide. Creating opportunities for peers to be a part of their own process of recovery and then reach back out to others beginning their journey is the system which drives a trauma-informed community and is our best resource for sustainability. Next. As any trained peer specialist knows, a truly trauma-informed approach comes from gaining as well as emotional self. We remain authentic and practice vulnerability. When we can do this for ourselves, we can in turn do this for others, which helps us to facilitate the process of healing, and is why I wanted to share with you this quote by Marianne Williamson. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And the next slide. So I wanted to invite you all to connect with these different peer organizations, the mental health community centers, or NAMI, Sarasota and Manatee counties, Sarasota Strong, the Suncoast Regional Peer Advisory Council, and a youth move was mentioned, which we're hoping to bring a youth-run organization in our community of Sarasota and Manatee counties as well in the future. So be on the lookout from Sarasota and Manatee for that. And so we have a little bit of time. If we had any questions or comments.
Let's see, if anyone wants to put a question or comment in the chat box, or even just raise your hand and we can pick on you here. Yeah, Lauren, go ahead.
Hello. I'm joining you today from Geelong in Australia, Victoria, Australia. Wow. And we are looking to commence our own peer support groups. within our governance of the mental health region, Australia is broken up into primary health networks. There's 31 of them, and I represent carers as a lived experience person within the primary health network in Geelong, in our western region of Victoria. And it's appearing to us that we really need to be stronger with recognising the benefits of peer support. And whilst other states in Australia, such as Queensland, one of our northern states, has some 400 people working within a peer support network, we still don't have a structure. And I wondered if you have one governance body where you have an act that does address the format and requirements for peer support. I noticed that, I think somebody mentioned that they had a state certified peer certificate. And I wonder how, what was involved in that, and whether that was nationwide or if it was common between the states, or each state had their own, or did all states participate in a peer workforce, or not all of them participate?
That's a great question, and I'll start it. And I think maybe Tim might want to jump in too, because I know he had to get certified in 2 different states. But yes, we do have a certification board. We're in Florida in the United States right now, and so that is who we follow their requirements as far as what qualifies for getting certified. And there's specific education domains that you need to get training in, which include things like mentoring, recovery support, trauma-informed care, and there's a few others. Can't recall right off the top of my head. And then 500 hours of working, like on the job training type of thing, where you're working with peers and you're getting supervision as you're working with them. And then after you've submitted all of that, you take a test and have to pass the test. And then that is what qualifies you as being certified or not. But it does deviate a bit from state to state. Connecticut. Isn't me. Tim, did you want to add anything to that with your certification?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like she said, it was kind of breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what you said, but it is different in different states. Each state has their own certification process and their own things that you have to go through. And then there is also a national certified peer specialist through the Florida Certification Board. And so and that has a little bit more requirements too. It's 1,000 in work hours and things like that. So there's different certifications in different states, and it, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Tim and Sarah. As you noticed, yeah, Sarah's comments broke up. I didn't hear all of them, but I noticed too that this has been developed in America since 2003, and I feel that we've been very slow in picking up on this. It's disappointing, even though it's been acknowledged in Australia for some time. It hasn't really been acted on, and we've just been going through a process for a Commonwealth Royal Commission into the state of mental health. in Australia and also within our state, a productivity commission, various recommendations have been made, and the focus is on looking for the gaps. What is it that's working versus what's not working, and how can we improve on this? And it's appearing to many of us that we do need to develop a peer workforce far greater than the tokenism that's been given to it so far. So yeah, I congratulate you that you're well underway with utilising the benefits of peer work.
Yeah, it's so exciting to know that. Oh, sorry.
No, fine. Go ahead, Sarah.
It's exciting to know you're in Australia and that you're following us and logged in here and are looking for this information.
Yeah, I'm very much aware of the process of reinventing the wheel, and it's something we have catchphrases that come up and are continually used, and yet we don't jump over the hurdle of the catchphrase. We're not getting down to the nitty gritty, and why do we have to have 30 bodies look at creating a set of guidelines when there's already some out there working? Mm-hmm. Why can't we say review this one and review 5 of them and say take the elements from there and make them suited to our needs? And so I'm very interested to see how successful that you are, and listen to your speakers who have really benefited from the experience of peer work coming into their life. It's great.
Right. I'm going to put in our chat too the website for our certification board in Florida if you wanted to just take a look at some of our guides and manuals. Just like you said, not wanting to recreate the wheel, but see what's already being done somewhere. And if that's a helpful guide for you to share out, then I hope that will benefit you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Vanessa, we got a great question here that maybe you'd like to answer. Someone asked, how can we help youth to be open to meeting a peer specialist? Oh, did we lose her too? Can you hear us, Vanessa?
Sorry, my connection just went out.
That's okay.
But I heard you.
Oh, okay, great.
That's actually a really hard one. I've been working with a couple youth who kind of, are there sometimes and sometimes they're not. And that's okay. For me in that situation, as their peer, I'm just there to sit with them. If they're not up to talking that day, that's okay. I'm here as support. So if we have to come down to their level, don't expect everyone to just match your energy. And I feel like that's how we can kind of help support our youth, is to help them know that we're here to be with them, to not push them into anything they're not comfortable with yet, is to kind of understand their limits,
Here's another one for Timothy. What were the steps you took to find the support with your diagnosis?
Okay, yeah. I'm diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and I first, I'll make this quick, but first it was going to the hospital. Next, it was going to therapy, going to a lot of outpatient groups, but I needed the support from my family. I needed the support from my peers. I needed the support from people in the 12-step programs that I was going to. So a lot of the support was from different places, but I brought it all together and reached out and definitely got help. But also medication management took 10 years to get on a balance of medication that actually worked for me, and things like that. So I hope that answers the question.
Another one here. I think any of you could probably tackle this. Do peers face any barriers to being accepted as an important part of the mental health system?
Part of the requirements for the certification, one of the things is advocacy. And I've learned that advocating for peer support in general is a huge part of my job and what I do, because it's not that it's not a negative view of peer support, but there could be more experience with peer support throughout the state, and throughout the nation even. And I just think advocating for peer support, for example, something like this conversation tonight, advocates for peer support. So doing things like that really bring light to the peer support world and the movement.
Thank you. Let's see. And then here was another one for you, Tim. Did you attend any Dbsa peer groups? And maybe you want to elaborate on what that acronym is.
Honestly, I didn't attend Dbsa peer groups because I'm not sure what that stands for.
Does that stand for Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance? Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I did not attend those specific groups, but I attended a schizophrenia rehabilitation program. I attended different peer support groups. I attended definitely a lot of dual diagnosis outpatient groups. And that's where I got, and obviously mental health community centers and peer support coalition of Florida, and all of that has helped me to maintain my recovery.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Anything for our wonderful speakers? We have a lot of praise in the comments, a lot of thank you for sharing your stories. Said it was a wonderful presentation. We got one more question here. How much information about the impact of trauma is included in the peer training?
For certification purposes, Andy, I believe if you're talking about certification purposes, it's 2 hours, I want to say, of required trauma-informed training. You guys heard me right. I just realized so much of what I've been saying has been missed, so I'm just like,
We got that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I saw Gail said something.
Let's see.
I'm trying to see what.
I think we got to Gail's question. I was trying to catch them as they were sliding in here.
Oh, okay. Might have been a moment I was out.
Gail said to please share the warm line number, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's 1-800-845-1355. Peer specialists answer every night. And I worked on a warm line when I was in Connecticut, and it's basically a peer specialist on the other side of the line where you can call if you're having a tough day, if you're a little anxious or something like that. It's not a crisis line, but it's a warm line to call and just talk to somebody, talk to a peer specialist. So I would advocate for that as well.
Mm.
Yeah, that's in our chat for anyone that wants to copy that down. And we can also send out tonight's resources along with this for everyone that was on the call. More praise to widely promote that line.
Thank you so much. It's really been such a pleasure to have this space to share more about peer support and how it's such a valuable resource that we have in our community. It's something so many of us do naturally. I mean, any one of us, if we wanted to think about a tough time in our life, who did we talk to? How many of us went and saw a professional, and how many of us went and talked to a friend or family member or someone who understood and had been through it before? Because to us, those are the experts. We want to see somebody who's gone through it, who's been there, who's worn those shoes. And that really is the value that you know, letters after a name doesn't really capture. And it's a very important part for so many people's recovery, just to make sure that they have a strong supportive network around them who can understand and just be there with them and be that empathetic listener.
Any more questions or comments? Or we can wrap up early if that's what you guys want to do. We just have, I'll share here. So if you want to go ahead and wrap us up, Sarah.
Sure. So we'd really love if you could stay in touch with us and keep connected. We have so many more opportunities like this available, workshops where we're discussing importance of trauma and resilience. So our next webinar is going to be on aging, trauma, resilience. Aging, Trauma, Resilience Committee focuses on the isolation and trauma experienced by aging adults. More recently coordinated an initiative to bring traveling carolers and joy to isolated communities this past Friday, so residents can enjoy some holiday cheer in a safe setting. If you speak Spanish, inclusion is one of Sarasota Strong's top priorities. We're currently working to provide more resources for our Latinx community members and have a newly developed page on our website with resources and updates. One of our founding Spanish leaders, Jerry Chang, hosts a radio show, a new weekly half-hour program for Spanish-speaking parents who are now involved in distance learning. So tune in each week, Mondays at 11:30 online or on air 105.3 FM, 99.1 FM, and 1280 AM. Raising Anti-Racist Children Parenting Workshop is an additional workshop dates will be announced shortly. This is a great workshop for parents with children under the age of 12 who are looking to become more informed with anti-racism work. And then coming up Monday, January 25th from 6 to 7:30, our next webinar will be the trauma of human trafficking. Speakers from Selah Freedom and More to Life will highlight the importance of prevention, provide tips for communicating with youth, delve into what domestic trafficking looks like, and share personal experiences with trafficking. You can register through Eventbrite to attend this workshop.
So we did have one other person ask a question real quick. How can we find out about peer support in other states?
That's a pretty good question. I guess what I would say is, this is terrible to say Google, but each state, I believe, has their, their own managing entity or certification board that would be knowledgeable of it. And again, maybe Tim, you want to jump in here, but like I mentioned with Florida, ours is the Florida Certification Board. I would imagine there's perhaps another state that would have something very similar to that. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, like you said, it's terrible to say Google, but when I get speakers from all over the nation for the Sunshine Pier Network, I just Google and then go down the rabbit hole and do the research that it takes to get to where the certification process starts for people in other states. So honestly, I just Google it, and there is a national association for peer support. It's called INAPS, International Association for Peer Supporters, and they have that as well. So.
It looks like
I'm just dropping a few links too.
Great, and we'll include these links for everyone who tuned in tonight. We will send out a little email for all the resources. We'll hang out, maybe see if someone else has another question or two. If not, all right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, Matt, Timothy, Vanessa. We really appreciate you sharing your stories tonight and providing these amazing resources and putting this presentation together for our community and also worldwide, now that we know we've reached Australia. And I saw earlier someone from the UK as well. So we really thank everyone for tuning in tonight. And we hope that you can take this information back to your communities and create communities that care for itself, wherever you reside. So we hope to see you at the next meeting. And there will also be a survey going out after this meeting, just to see how you enjoyed this presentation, and also if you would like to join another one and where you're at. So thank you, everybody, and have a great holiday. Happy New Year.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Be here.
Thank you, everybody.